Welcome to episode 3, Evan. Thanks for coming on the show.
Of course. Really happy to be here and chat this evening.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know Evan ran for city council. I know he's worked in, I feel like pretty high up positions in government or something. But I don't know, his resume looks pretty fancy. And I really like the way he talks about policy and the way he understands, what we need to do. He's been a mental health advocate, especially for men. And just, I feel like there's so much there that we're not doing that I've seen Evan advocate for. I don't know if there's anything else I missed there that...
No, that's nothing you said is incorrect.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I would say that my political career, my mental health career, I don't view as separate things. I view them as two sides of the same coin. Activism and politics go hand in hand. So when I was in the mental health space, first at jack.org, it's a youth mental health charity that has chapters at schools across Canada. I was rallying students to learn about mental health, to talk about stigma, to learn how to access care, and also lobby their schools to provide better care. The work that's involved in activism, which is volunteer management, communications, understanding how policy works to get, an objective met, is exactly what you do in politics. So when I ran for council the first time 2 years ago, I technically didn't have any political experience. I'd never, worked in government before, but I took what I learned from my time at jack.org and at Capitalize for Kids, where I was a change management consultant in the mental health space, and just applied it directly to politics. And so when I continued, working in Ottawa for the federal government, it didn't really feel that different.
Interesting.
It was just, from the outside looking in versus being a part of the machine and still trying to get the same job done in a very different way. So
you got me thinking about getting students to advocate for better mental health resources, because I know when I was in university, I feel like we did not have good mental health resources, and even though I was struggling with my mental health, I was like, okay, let me go. I finally got the courage to be like, you know what, I'm kind of fucked right now. Let's go ask for some help. And I did, and I feel like they didn't really know what they were doing. There was these counselors that we go talk to, but I feel like they were they just the most basic training possible. They're like, here's a breathing exercise. And I was like, that's okay. I guess that's all we have today.
Well, they're swamped, right? What I found, because I also accessed my university mental health resources, is they had the capacity to see me maybe 3 times in a year. When you're 19 and you're partying every week and you're, slipping in school, you might have an entire relationship in between 2 sessions. That's not adequate care.
Right.
And it might be a different therapist you're seeing each time, and their client load is so high that they can't necessarily offer the correct care that would actually leave you better off. So I found that at that age and at that time, I was a university student 2014 2019, it was already quite difficult, especially for men, to go out and acknowledge there's a problem to get mental health help. And then when you finally take that step and it's okay, you get seen twice this semester with no signs of improvement, that's a second hurdle that is extremely tough, and I think it makes people less likely to seek care.
Well, I didn't go back. They did they did a couple sessions, and they're like, all right, I don't think this guy's gonna kill himself, and they're like, is there anything else you want from us? And I was like, well, I feel like I still have a lot of mental health issues, but I don't know what you guys are gonna do about it. So then I just stopped going after that, right? Because what am I doing here?
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing is that's how youth mental health is looked at across, I would say across the world. I know Ontario the best just because that's where I worked. They have to triage because there are so many people that aren't getting the care they need. We talk about hospitals a lot politically, but mental health gets a fraction of the funding, and it's one of the largest like economic losses, poor mental health
Yeah.
in the world, you might be waiting 18 months as a kid or longer for mental health care, publicly funded mental health care in Ontario.
Yeah.
So if you are, let's say you're a 12-year-old kid and you have anxiety, or you're in high school and you have depression, well, you're in line with thousands of other kids in the same boat, and they can't take all of you, so they take the kids who are the worst off. Then, because you have depression or anxiety or something else, and you are untreated and you don't know what to do, you stagnate, you get worse, and then maybe you go up to the top of the queue because you have an incident that leads you to the hospital.
Yeah.
Like, when we don't deal with these things upstream, with good, let's say good care on campus, or more resources available to folks to understand these things and maybe deal with something on their own, it ends up costing more because we get more complex cases more frequently down the line. And that's true in healthcare too, but in mental health care, I would say it's exacerbated because we've let that get even worse than our hospital system.
I had a few thoughts, I guess. So one is like, you got me thinking about mental health and like, people are bad and then they get worse, and then now we start caring about them. And I feel like, to me, so much of my mental health, even though it never got to the point where they're like, oh, like, help this guy a lot immediately, so much of my mental health journey has been like hovering up and down within the like bad area, and never getting to the bottom area. And I've needed help like the whole time, right? And I think I got a lot from my friends. Now I have a job, I have good insurance, it's easier to get mental health, and like that's been really good. But I feel like we don't talk enough about like, how do you get people like maybe even you have like anxiety, but like it's not like clinically like certified anxiety, but you have some, right? And like they're definitely not going to treat you for that, right? And there's so much there of like, how do you go from having mental health issues to having like a positive life, right? And the system is not equipped to deal with any of that at all, right? It's really just, oh, you're at the bottom, let's get you out of the bottom, and then good luck. Like, becoming a happy person, I guess. Because to me, it's like there's like getting you from like, -1 to 0, and then there's also like 0 to +1, and like all we do is we get you from like -1 to -0.9, and then they let you go. And there's so much more to your mental health journey, at least there has been for mine.
Yeah, and I think journey is the right word, because I think very few people have a static mental health.
Yeah.
Just like in perpetuity, you'll have good days and bad days. It's
so
when we start to
good day.
when you start to have more bad days like pile up, that's a cause for concern. And I found, and I don't think this is true anymore because it's pretty hard to get a family doctor now, but when I was in university, getting seen for cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy, which teach you resilience. Very difficult to get. You're on a waiting list, and it's 12 weeks of training, and you might need more. But that was pretty difficult. It was not that hard to go to your doctor, write your symptoms on a paper, and then they prescribe you with sertraline or Wellbutrin, which
that's the other thing. It's very easy to get the meds. But it's a lot it's a lot harder to get the therapy. And I think the way I see the meds, I don't know, I don't have that much experience with them, I guess, but to me it seems like it's a tool to like get you by until you get proper treatment to like actually help you be better. Like if you're feeling depressed, maybe it'll like turn your depression off, but it'll also just turn off your whole life. But at least that gives you like time, I guess, to get proper therapy or get CBT or that kind of thing. But then it doesn't seem that available, right? And I don't know what your experience with CBT and all these things were, but
I think they both do different things. Like the med part is an acknowledgement that you have a brain chemistry and that your brain chemistry is off when you have depression or anxiety. That is true. And you do, like I've taken both, CBT and Wellbutrin and sertraline. Sertraline didn't work for me. Wellbutrin did. Sometimes you do need that kickstart from an actual drug. Like
that makes sense.
It doesn't really matter what therapy you get. Like you need like in my personal case, I did find it helpful. But you're right that I also didn't think it was going to solve all my problems in the long run. You do need to be resilient so that the next time you have like a hard day, week, or month, you're not knocked down to the floor again and need to go back from square one.
I guess like the way that I see these things is because I started meditating a lot, and I think a lot of the therapies work similar to meditation, where I think when you're meditating, you are like changing your brain chemistry by doing something. Does that make sense? And so when you take meds, like you take Wellbutrin or something, it changes your brain chemistry in a certain way so that you have time to make the therapy work, because the therapy is not going to like change your brain chemistry in one day and then like, oh great, you're better, right? The therapy is its own journey, or 12 weeks at least, or whatever it is, right? And I guess the meds are like to keep you going, right, while you do other manual changes to your brain chemistry.
Yeah, and I don't think everyone's gonna have the same journey. For some people, maybe one or the other is enough. For me, it wasn't.
Do you think the meds are enough? Because like I feel like everyone that I've talked to with like that's been on meds, at least for depression, it has not been enough. And like I'm on meds for ADHD now, and I think like I've done a lot of work on myself to work on my ADHD other than the meds, and I feel like it's like the combination of them that has really helped me thrive.
Yeah, I mean, I think a combination is probably ideal.
Yeah.
I'm operating on the assumption that you just want to be practicing healthy living anyways.
Yeah.
But there are some people where, you might be doing everything right, and then, something still doesn't work, and maybe then the medication is enough.
Yeah.
I think...
Well, to me, that is the combination.
Yeah.
Right? You are doing both.
That's
right?
true. For like, some people start with neither the correct habits nor the correct brain chemistry. Some people might be just missing one or the other.
Yeah.
I hesitate to just, be really convicted on this because I'm not a pharmacist too. But
everyone's situation is different.
Yeah.
You can't know what any one person's going through. But yeah, I guess since I've started getting into meditation, I've been really thinking about like how we change our brain chemistry and like what that looks like, because I feel like that's what, like, there's a lot of different meditations out there, and I feel like the more research we do on them, the more we're like, oh, this stuff actually really works. Like, we should be prescribing meditation and stuff like that because of the way it changes your brain chemistry. Like, I know CBT and a lot of other modern mental health treatments are based off of like some of these ancient practices too, right? Like, we kind of took them and we made a more secular version of maybe some like ancient Indian practice or something, and then we're like, oh, now it's here you go, and then we can prescribe CBT and it works, right? And yeah, that's something I've been thinking about a lot. Like, I know a lot of people are talking about psychedelics for mental health too, and to me it seems like a lot of those are like ways to accelerate changes in brain chemistry. I don't know if you know much about those, but
I'm aware that it's been talked about.
Yeah.
I haven't looked into the effects or like, I know there's one MP in particular, Alistair McGregor, who's very big on psilocybin or psilocybin, yes, as a treatment for all sorts of things.
Yeah, I think I'm big on it now too, but like the way I see it is that my understanding of like between personal experience and looking at the studies and listening to experts is that it makes your brain more susceptible to changes in brain chemistry based on like what you're doing. So then if you do therapy on psilocybin, which is what the studies have been doing, then like you get way more effects of therapy in one shot, right? And to me, that's like a really exciting place where I'm hoping that we can improve people's mental health, but we're moving so slowly on that too, right? And it's like, I guess to me that's like a new technology, and I think because like it is so hard to provide so many resources for these people, for so many people, and like in the traditional medical space, we're often looking at like what new technology can we get to make healthcare cheaper and better, right? And when we don't do that, that's when like it's hard to keep up with healthcare if we're not using new technology.
I think that tech is definitely important. I will say that might be giving too much credit to our government under the assumption that we're trying our best.
That's
and still
true. Yeah,
I know because
they could do better without new tech.
So when I was at Capitalize for Kids, Capitalize for Kids is a non-profit consultancy that works with youth mental health agencies and consortiums across Canada to reduce wait times with, business change management solutions, new tech, removing burden on staff, improving clinical outcomes. There's a lot of inefficiencies, like even on the business side of things. Like, for example, one of the first things that Capitalize for Kids did in, I think it was 12 Toronto agencies, was institute an appointment reminder system.
Yeah.
Like something that you would assume just would be there anyways. But
that's
what it
pretty
did
simple.
is, it just sends you a text 3, 2, and 1 days in advance to say, are you still coming to your appointment? No shows dropped by a third.
Yeah.
And so when you think of like how many clinical hours get wasted from no shows, if you're able to just like see like a third more clients, that's huge.
Without any changes to the treatment, without hiring any more staff, like we can
then
see more people.
Now my number might be out of date. I don't think it's going to be vastly different, but if you were to guess for a psychologist at a regular Ontario children's mental health agency, how many hours a week would you assume out of 40 that they spend on care?
20?
15.
15?
15 hours a week.
Yeah.
So more than half their week is spent on administrative stuff. So it's report writing.
Yeah.
Some of that's unavoidable, maybe meetings, but 15 hours a week with kids that need mental health help is pretty abysmal.
Yeah.
It either leads to one of two things. Either, kids are waiting a long time that they don't need to be. Because let's face it, these people are, trained medical professionals. They should be spending 40 hours a week treating kids. The other thing that happens is because they want to see as many kids as possible, they end up taking more of a load than they can handle and burn out. So the burnout rate in the mental health sector is extremely high for clinicians. And if you're in the public sector, you're burnt out, you're overworked, you're underpaid, you can just become a private therapist at a clinic.
Well, I guess also you're seeing the worst of the worst kids too, right? Like it's not like you get a balance. Like everyone that you're seeing is like, minus 10 out of 10.
Yeah, well, you're seeing kids that can't afford private therapy. And that's extremely problematic. And, we've seen similar vicious cycles with nurses, for example, where they're underpaid and overworked and they leave to become travel nurses because the pay is better and the quality of life's better. That's a structural problem, and that's specifically a failure of government to adequately compensate good workers. Brain drain's real. Brain drain's real, and it leads to worse outcomes, whether that's your doctor, your nurse, your psychotherapist. If you're not paying them properly or you're not actually funding the system properly, people at the margins who are the most vulnerable are going to be the first to feel it. So I do think, we need to keep innovating, and government should be supporting tech innovations, but we are so bad at the basic stuff. There's a lot of stuff we could do right now that would have immense return on investment. Some of it being free, like an appointment reminder system. Some of it costing money but having better return. Like we can do that today with no technological progress. And that's the kind of stuff that I was happy to be doing at Capitalize for Kids, and I would have been really happy to just do that for the rest of my life. But honestly, it shouldn't be the job of a charity to be fixing the problems with Ontario's mental health system.
I guess where I kind of want to take the conversation a little bit is thinking more about like, what can we do? And like, what can I do? What can you do? What can like people listening do? Because I think like getting government to change is hard work, and you're doing some of that work, and that's going to take a while. But like, as men, like, what can we do? Do we support our friends? Like, I know I saw this meme of, and they were just like making fun of like, oh, when your friend starts talking and using like manosphere language, and you're like, ah, shit, this guy's screwed. Like, what's going on here, right? And then so it's like, do you have a perspective on like how we can help our friends, right? Because I think probably a lot of the people that are listening are people that have good understandings of mental health, and maybe they're seeing friends that are screwed, or maybe they want to help their friends, or like they need some help from their friends. Like, how do you feel we could go about that better as like regular people?
I think what you're doing here is a good example of positive work, and just being a male space to talk to men about things that we all face.
Yeah.
Like mental health is not specifically a men's issue, but what is a men's issue is that men face mental health issues at the same rate, but talk about it less and commit suicide more.
Yeah.
The male suicide rate is 4 times the,
Exactly. Yeah.
like it's a huge problem. So when I was
like our issues are different from women's. Like the way that we're gonna handle it is gonna be different than the way women are gonna handle it, right? So
and like when I was in university, I was when I first joined, I think I was the only man in my like mental health advocacy group. I think by the end there were maybe 4 of us out of 20. Yeah. So it was not a male dominated space because men traditionally don't talk about their well-being. So it was an uphill battle. You know, I find in a lot of, you know, socially progressive spaces, sometimes the way we try to communicate to the world is quite academic, or like, you know, we're running before we can walk. Like, I'll be a little facetious here. Like a white guy at Queens who's 19 years old is not going to be sold on intersectionality.
Right?
Even though it definitely, the irony is there's a lot of intersectionality between like men mental health issues like that. You know, it's not mutually exclusive with like feminism. It's like the patriarchy. It all works together, but that's not how you're going to reach that guy, right? Like you're going to have someone who's gone through it. So for me, like, you know, I've been struggling, well, less so recently, but I had for a long time struggled with depression, with anxiety, with substance use. And, you know, I had to do a lot of work on myself. But one of the ways that I went about it was also addressing the elephant in the room. And that was effective when I was in university as an advocate, because other men on campus didn't necessarily hear that from each other. You know, a lot of people were binge drinking or struggling with school or super stressed. And then they just dealt with it in horrible ways, you know, by binge drinking more or kind of pulling away from school or pulling away from their friends, acting out.
So there's a lot of other substances available these days if you're in, you know, young people communities for you to find and abuse, right? Like there's a lot of options out there.
Yeah, and honestly, like it's not like alcohol's that great for you. Alcohol has like the largest health burden in the world. Like it's that's bad enough.
No, I think it's one of the worst drugs for sure.
Yeah.
Like
so I think back to your question about like what men can do. I think being open and honest and meeting each other where we are. I think a lot of people get pushed away from progressive circles because they try to enter the space and then they're not immediately at the academic level that everyone else that is there, and it becomes like a daunting space or not necessarily a welcoming space. And I don't think
I've been in like progressive spaces where I don't know, I feel like I said something like, oh man, you know, like men's mental health is like really bad or something, right? And people like attacked me, right? Maybe not that bad, but like, or maybe I didn't use the right academic language. I didn't show like a full understanding of the issue. And I'm like, you know, I think I agree with that person's like super academic take, intersectionality or whatever it was, right? But like I got pushed away from that space because I didn't understand it, literally just because I didn't understand it.
Yeah, and I think that's something important as advocates that we have to know. Like, you don't have to water down your beliefs. You shouldn't, actually. If you believe something, like, stick to your guns. But just because something is true and you believe it doesn't mean it's always a great communications piece. And it doesn't mean it's a great recruitment tool. So, I mean, one of the reasons you started this is that the right has been very good at recruiting. They're not particular with their language. They're they're particular about, you know, some maybe darker language, but
I think it's that even if you don't agree with them 100%, they're not gonna like
they're very good at like luring people who would otherwise be, I think, progressive allies.
Well, like there's this meme that I've seen, I've been thinking about it a lot, and there's like a progressive guy. And then he's like, what do you mean you don't have like 100% of the right beliefs? Like, I have always been right about everything. And if you're not, like, you can fuck off. And then there's like a Nazi, And he's like, whoa, you haven't heard about like Nazi beliefs, bro? I have so many things to tell you. Here's like scientific arguments for racism. Like, welcome to the club. Like, you have like one question, he's like ready to give you everything, right? And you go to progressive space and you're like, hey, like, I don't know if I understand like why would intersectionality be good for men or something, right? And then they're like, I can't believe you don't understand this. Like,
Yeah, we can't be pushing people away like that.
yes.
I think people are realizing that now. You know, people are not going to start on the ground floor with all of the tools at their disposal.
You know, I didn't.
No.
So
No, but if you kind of meet people where they are, foster a space where people can learn, people can make mistakes, people can occasionally say stupid things, and then learn from that, you're probably going to get a lot of really good advocates and allies out of that. So like, I think a narrow message to start. So, you know, when I talked to other men at university, on campuses about mental health, even though I was coming at it from a place where I did educate myself on intersectionality, on feminism, on racism, on queer issues, and that was important to me to not say the wrong thing. You don't go to someone who has no idea about any of these issues and overload them with everything. You find the one issue that they're probably ready to talk about. And in my case, I was, from personal experience, able to talk about men's mental health and racism just as a brown man, but that's not, you know, everybody's issue. So once you know, connect on an issue of common ground, it then becomes easier to talk about other things. I
think that's how I got like to where I am, like in terms of like understanding of social things, is just like talking to people about mental health and talking to people about like really how it affected me at the end of the day. I think I was talking to like a friend about feminism, and he didn't ask me to be like 100% maximum feminist or whatever, but I think he talked about like, well, actually, Ramsey, like, if people are discriminating against women in this way, then aren't they discriminating against men in like the opposite way? And like, it's actually bad for you. And I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense, right? He didn't ask me to have those beliefs already. He just like explained a little bit to me, and I was like, oh, and it got me thinking, and then that's how I started going to where I am now.
Yeah, and I think like, it doesn't mean you have to like turn a blind eye to beliefs you like don't like. Like I think there's a way to, you know, nudge someone or correct someone when they espouse a belief that you don't gel with. But I think the question that you have to consistently ask is this someone that is on the right track, like their heart's in the right place, but they're stumbling? Or is this someone who's actually espousing hate? And I think those are that's a distinction that's really important. Like, if you have...
It's interesting, because actually, I think for me, my perspective is that all hate that you see is actually just somebody who has mental health issues at the end of the day. And this is more of a like existential question of like, you know, the nature of the human experience.
It's possible, but I'm not going to try and treat Nick Fuentes, for example, like, fuck that guy. Like, he might be so far gone that like maybe you're right.
Well, you know, I think there's a difference too between like someone who's like an influencer and a leader in a space versus someone who's like learning from that space. Like the leaders are so invested in the ecosystem at this point. You know, someone who's making money off of it is going to be much harder to like bring them out of that than somebody who's paying money for advice or paying like a Patreon for these kinds of people, right?
That's true. Yeah. No, I think you can't start from the belief that there's like a third of the population or half the population that's just inaccessible. Even if it sometimes feels that way, it's just not helpful. It's not good advocacy. You can still feel deeply upset by, you know...
No, for sure.
But I do think you're right that a lot more people... there's a lot of people who can be compelled by the right message to, you know, shift a little bit. It is how progress happens. It's not...
I think that's the thing. It's one thing at a time, right? Like, you don't solve racism by, like, anytime you see someone do something racist, you say, that's racist, you're a bad person. You talk to them about, like, why they did the racist thing. You, like, move them a little bit over at a time. You move one person over a little bit at a time, and then eventually people get better.
Yeah, it's tough. I think,
Yeah, it's tough when especially when someone's saying something bad about you.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is we're also in a pretty unprecedented environment where information and misinformation and disinformation travel extremely quickly.
Yeah,
People are very
that's true.
siloed. You can choose the environment that of like you can choose your own information diet, or rather it can choose you. Like I know the TikTok algorithm and the Twitter algorithm are pushing specific beliefs on young men specifically. There's a current that is really powerful that didn't exist before. And so like, there's like existential questions about are all people salvageable? And then there's like the practical questions of we are experiencing a fire hose of absolute shit. Like a class 5 rapid of misinformation that I don't know if I know how to fix that. And it does seem like, for my entire lifetime up until this point, it seemed like the dominant culture was more progressive. Or rather, it was like a counterculture, and the system itself was more regressive. Now it seems like there's a bit of a flip where being more progressive, more, let's call it woke. I don't really know what woke means, but like that seems to be the status quo, and this like kind of far right conservatism is this burgeoning counterculture that's
I think we have to be cooler. Because I think like part of the misinformation thing is like being edgy and being cool and being fun, and I think part of that is not always being right, like not always being perfectly right, and like making mistakes and just being like, that's how it is. And I feel like part of the like academic language is like, oh, you're not perfectly right, like that's not okay, and that's why it feels so status quo, right? Because like, oh, the machine, is like right, it knows the right thing and it does the right thing, and then the counterculture is like there's mistakes and there's disagreement, and like that's how it goes. And I think that's kind of fun. Being in that kind of culture is fun, right? And we gotta like we have to be fun, I guess.
Yeah, and there's also like when you're disaffected, right? Like when like economics are really important in this. A lot of young white men were told, you have actually started on third base. You're doing better. And technically speaking, they're correct. Like, yes, if I could choose the genetic lottery, I would be a middle-class white man born in North America or Europe. Like, that's true. But if your experience is you have all those things, but also the housing market sucks, and I'm not going to be able to live the life my parents did, and you're desperate for something where even if you're better off than, a brown man, a black man, a Latino woman in the same position, you don't feel very well off. And then suddenly...
But I think like it really depends on the person too, right? Like just because you have those traits doesn't mean that maybe your family has money, for example, right? And I feel like that can make as much of a difference, if not a bigger difference, than some of the other things.
Well, that's what I think the conservative countercultural movement really picked up on, is that it's about class. Now, they picked up on it in the worst way, where they intentionally divided us by race. They blamed, Mexicans, immigrants, trans people, and then they sicked that message on these poor working class white people who were desperate for anything, because they were being told that all of your situation is your fault because you won the lottery. And so these are truths that can kind of coexist together, that systemic racism is real and sex discrimination is real, but classism is so much more powerful. And if we ignore that, if we kind of ignore that, like there's like a powerful elite at the top that is a lot more comfortable than the rest of us, that variable has a lot stronger of an effect than anything else. We as progressives have been really slow to pick up on that. I think radical progressives haven't. I guess like that's the whole deal with Marxism, is that class is the most important factor.
Well, I think to me I don't even see as like an elite I don't see this class divide as that stark, because I think to me it is more of a spectrum. And even if your parents made like decent middle class money, then, you know, or middle upper class money, maybe they could pay for your therapy, right? Versus somebody who's working class, like they're not gonna have money to go pay for an extra therapist. And I think that feeds into culture too. Like if you're working class, therapy is probably more stigmatized than if you're middle class, right? And just like all these things feed into each other too to make the situation a lot worse.
Yeah, and I think there's a good binary that you and I have talked about a lot. Do you own your home?
Yeah.
Like that's become so stark,
especially with how bad the housing crisis is now. Or like, do your parents own their home?
Yeah, and that, like, if you own your home, I'm sorry, you have no other problems. Like, maybe your mortgage goes up. I would love to be in a position.
Even then, though, Evan, because like, even if your parents own their home or something, right? Like, well, I have friends that are living in their parents' basement, right? And like, their mental health is not good.
No,
right? And
no. I mean, if you own your home, like, I can empathize with that. Yeah. I mean, those, like, it's not a good life to be waiting for your parents to die.
But I feel like even then, like, so much of the mental health is like, there's so much. I think to me it is like it's almost a lot more about culture than wealth, because like even I think like it's like even if you have no other problems, I think mental health is like there's so much of it. Like you could be making money and own a home and still like be drinking every weekend, or maybe like you're doing cocaine every weekend because like you actually have the money to afford that and that's your escape, right? But your mental health is like in the shit because you're spending thousands of dollars from your well-paying job on cocaine every month or something, right?
There's
so much to it that
you can have problems that exist in spite of, you know, like a lucky upper class upbringing. I agree with that. I guess where I was going with this is that the lack of housing security that comes with renting, or the despair that comes with knowing you will never own a home is terrifying. You can be rent evicted at any point. You can have your rent increased. Like you, instead of having an asset that appreciates in value, and eventually, you know, in sometimes it's decades, like you pay off your mortgage and then you're set. You are constantly in the sinkhole if you are renting. Even if you have a good rate, that's money you don't get back. Whereas when you pay your mortgage, you end up with more of your home.
I mean, personally, from a financial perspective, I don't entirely, from like financial advisement perspective, I don't totally agree with the take that renting is throwing money away.
It's not, but it's, you're not becoming more secure by renting.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Like if you value security, and if you value that, I want to live in this home and I don't want anyone to be able to take that away from me. I want to, like that there is value in that.
It's interesting that, so I agree with you there, but I guess the way I understand mental health kind of is, I think a lot of these things like owning our home is almost a substitute for poor mental health. Like, to me, the ideal, like, maximum mental health, and I think, is that, like, even if you have nothing, you'd still be happy, right? And I think, but, like, to tie that back into, you know, having a house, I think the more stuff that you have, the more security that you have, the easier it is to work on your mental health, right? So, like, I think I've gotten to a point where I'm relatively financially stable, but not that much more than I used to be. But because I have some security there and I don't own my home, right? I've been able to like get my mental health to a point where I don't worry as much about not owning my home. If that makes sense?
Yeah, like, it's I think of it as Maslow's hierarchy, right? Like when you have your basic needs, like those are stressors that are out of the way. Like you're not fighting for survival. Like if you're living month to month because half your paycheck is rent,
it's hard to go see a therapist and work on your traumas.
Or that might be the reason you're going to see your therapist, because you might be lying awake at night being like, fuck, I don't know if I'm going to be kicked out of my house because I've been... And that does, like, your circumstances do affect your mental health a lot. I agree that there's
because I'm talking about like building resilience. Like once you have resilience built, then your external circumstances don't matter as much. But yeah, if you're lying awake at night thinking about how will I pay my bills tomorrow, it's hard to build resilience.
Yeah.
From that place.
Yeah, I agree that building resilience, it's not like a dollar per dollar thing. Like
Yeah.
you need to have your basic needs met in order to do that.
To start doing it.
But it's a step. It's not. You're right. It's not the entire process. Beyond that, there is a lot of work you have to do on yourself.
Yeah.
I think. I think personally, like, I do feel lucky. I grew up in like a well-off family in Lawrence Park. That didn't really provide much solace when I was struggling with depression in high school, university, or
Exactly, yeah.
or when I was
Right.
like, like if I started to drink more to kind of cope with it because I didn't know how,
Yeah.
like that kind of stuff. Like, no, you need to be. I was in a good place to work on it, but I still had the problem.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
So like
yeah.
go ahead.
I think, to me, that kind of like, I think about like the mental health skills that we gained growing up are like such a valuable inheritance in that way. Because even if like you didn't grow up, like with a lot, if you didn't grow up with a lot, but your parents had that resilience already, and they had those like mental health skills, and they taught those to you, that even if you don't have a lot now, you might be in a better spot. But if we see rich kids on the internet all day that like they grew up with a lot of money, like crazy amount, right? And then like their parents gave them a house as soon as they turned 18, and they still have crazy terrible mental health because I think they didn't learn the skills. And they're definitely it's gonna be a lot easier for them to go find a therapist and just start learning those skills because daddy will pay for it. But if you don't have those skills, then it almost is like, to me, it doesn't matter where you end up with that. And I think, and maybe I don't know what it was that like why some people do learn those skills in growing up and some don't, and like what's the historical root of maybe some cultures had better mental health skills or something. But I feel like so many of us, we didn't grow up with that. And actually, this another point. I know I feel like I'm rambling a little bit now, but I think for a long time, like religion was that source of like learning these mental health skills for people and learning resilience. And then when you don't have that anymore, or maybe you don't trust your parents' version of that, then you don't learn. I feel like I'm learning something about myself actually right now. Is that I think a lot of the mental health skills that my parents actually did have, they learned from religion. And when I grew up and I rejected that kind of like rejected learning those mental health skills.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, like, religion does have virtues, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't grow up practicing religion, but my dad comes from a Hindu family. My mom comes from I would say, lapsed Protestant family. I'm not religious, but I do respect that there are good teachings about how to live your life, how like what values you should have about self-improvement, and that's a really important part of this, right? Like,
well, to me, even like I was saying earlier, like I think CBT was developed from like ancient Hindu practices or something, right? So, and I'm sure there's similar things in Christianity and other religions, but just to add on to your point there, like like it's not even the virtues, but it's mental. Literally, they taught you mental health skills.
Yeah, well, I think a big part of improving your mental health is the drive to do so. I think I always try to start by looking at the surroundings because it is much harder for someone who has,
100%.
Your circumstances lead to that a lot.
Yeah.
But once you have the resources, the time, the space to work on your mental health, you cannot fix it if someone is just saying unlimited therapy, unlimited drugs. You're like you have to take those tools, and it's not like chemotherapy for cancer where you take the like the treatment and then it does its thing. You are in the driver's seat. So when I did CBT, like you have to be kind of evaluating your own thoughts. You have to be doing exercise. You literally have homework when you do that. I've had like sleep disorders in the past where like I have trouble falling asleep, and then like I used to wake up like well into the afternoon. The solution to when you like wake up too late? You just have to start waking up early, and your body will eventually correct itself. I mean, that was for me. It's not as simple as that, but there's an easy solution that really sucks. Like if you're going to bed at 3 and then like suddenly you're waking up at 7, you're gonna feel awful the next day. but that's the hard work that you do.
Yeah. Yeah, well then you'll actually start to get tired earlier because you're tired now, and then hopefully you'll go to sleep earlier, and then
So like I do on like in older societies, like I understand that like you were kind of, if you're in a communitarian society, you're kind of forced to do that because of social pressure.
Yeah.
I don't think it was all good. There's definitely some negative mental health associations with old religious practices, but that can of worms aside, like I do think that mental health skills or values, virtues, like they're all kind of one and the same. I think when we're asking the questions like what's the best and healthiest way to live your life, there's, if you can find that through a religion, that's great. If you don't want to find that through religion, there's a lot of ways to do that, but it means you have to actively seek it out.
I think to me part of the problem is like there's not easy and obvious ways to do that. Like a lot of the mental, like there's no easy framework where you go to somewhere every Sunday and then they teach you like a little bit of virtues, a little bit of mental health skills, like this, that, like there's if you're not going to church, then like maybe you go to therapy for a bit, but you got to pay for that, right? And it's like that's its own thing, right? It's very like there's no like secular religion, I guess. And I feel like not that religion was perfect, but I think a lot of the things maybe that now we're missing that are causing mental health issues is the lack of religion.
I would say lack of community. Like that's one of the things.
Well, I think community is a big part of religion, but to me it's like I think religion offered more than that.
It was a lot. It was a lot of things, but like one of the things that I've noticed about modern culture, and to be clear, like I'm happy for a lot of this. I have no interest in joining a religion, but when you see like in the old American shows that like the family goes to church every Sunday, and then after they have a potluck, it's like, oh, you actually meet everyone in your community. When I was like living alone, I didn't know any of my neighbors. I had no reason to, but I found in politics, for example, like I got more involved in neighborhood stuff, and neighborhoods I lived like my whole life. And I found there is community there. You have to work a little harder to go find it. So
I feel like also I never really knew about these things, right? And like when I've been, it's like a lot of old people, and not only old people, but like as young people, we don't really think of these kind of community events.
No, you go to like the ones of your school, or like if they have a bouncy castle, you're gonna go there. It becomes more important, I think, when you're an adult and you're like, I mean, school is also a community, so you take it for granted, but it's really valuable.
It is.
I think More Neighbors Toronto is another community. It's a community of like-minded people who are all passionate about one thing. You have, there's something that drives you together. It brings purpose. And,
any kind of hobby organization, whether it's like charity, volunteer, or just like for fun, but you have to go look for it, right? You do. Even if it's like a board game group, you got to go find a board game group or something.
It is, and I think that's something new with our fractured society. And I think parts of it are really good. That that's how multiculturalism works. Everyone can do their own thing, but it's a little more work to go find it. Like and I think that kind of goes back to like what we were talking about before with the algorithm, and where it used to be everyone watched the news at 7:00. Everyone got the exact same information and came to different conclusions. Now you can pick and choose your silos because there's not just one source that everyone goes to. And it does make us a little more bubbled, which is a problem in the sense that if I want to go communicate to someone in a different bubble, I have to know, one, go find that bubble, and two, figure out what they're all about and how to talk to them. I find sometimes, like I've done a lot of stakeholder work in politics, and figuring out how an in-group communicates with one another or how they view like outsiders is a whole different challenge.
Well, I think to me, like I guess the easy way to get out of your group that way is by doing like kind of hobby things, like playing board games. I've met people who I don't politically align with, right? And then I have to talk to them. I gotta get to know them a little bit, maybe understand their perspective a little better. And it's hard. You gotta go look for those spaces, right? They don't just like come to you so easily.
No, they don't. They do exist though. That's like one of my,
Yeah.
as much as, you know, I complain about our subway or our housing prices, I actually love Toronto so much for that reason, is that you can always find a group for anything.
Yeah, I think whatever your niche thing is, like whatever weird interest you have, you can find someone.
You can find it, and you can find like a burgeoning community of that thing.
Yeah.
It's not like there's like 5 people who are into snakes and ladders. There's like 10 board game cafes across the city.
Right.
Like you can join like 5 different levels of dodgeball leagues. There's like every cuisine, every religion here. Whatever, like it exists here.
I think that's the thing, is like, even though we have that, we still all have bad mental health here too, right? And like so like I know there's so much more to the puzzle of like building resilience into mental health than that, even though that's so important. I think like even when you have better mental health, you're more likely to go seek out those things, right? You're like, you know what? I've been kind of getting bored. I haven't been busy. Let me go find a board game group. When you're depressed, like you don't have the energy to go find a board game group, right? And then it's just like a self-reinforcing cycle. If you don't have the mental health tools, you also lose community, and then you lose both. I mean, even the other day, I was supposed to go to a party, and I was not having a good day. And then I almost didn't want to go. And I was like, man, I was worried about my social anxiety, and I was like, I don't know if I can go to this party. Like, what are people going to think of me? And I went there, and I had a blast, right? But if my mental health had been a little bit worse, and I hadn't made... Actually, you know what? I should give credit to my partner who forced me to go. Because she was like, Ramsey, you need to go to this fucking party. You're going to have a great time. And I was like, no, I don't think I will. Oh, man, I'm so boring and so sad. And I went there, and the people were amazing. It was fantastic. But say if you don't have somebody pushing you, or your mental health is just worse enough that you don't even make it to the party or the board game thing, then you lose that. You're double hit, right?
It's funny what you described, because me and my partner are the opposite. We're both, you know, fired up, ready to go to the party, and then one of us slowly starts convincing the other that it would be more fun to just stay inside and watch TV and then go to sleep.
Honestly, normally I'm the fired up person, but I was having a really bad day, and I was just like ready to give up and not go to the party. It's like, normally I love going to parties. I got the energy, and then once I got there, it came back, and you know, I met some great people, but it's like I think it was just having bad mental health just brought me down that day, and I almost didn't make it.
Yeah, sometimes how you feel in a moment is not actually how you like would feel in that situation.
Yeah. I think that's part of what therapy teaches.
Yeah.
That like I remember I had a little pamphlet from my therapist, and it was like, what you feel is not the truth. Like, what you feel is real, but that doesn't make whatever you feel to be true. And I did not remember that on that day, and I was feeling things, and I was like, this is definitely true.
I think like how I look at it is like, you can listen to your emotions, but they're not driving the bus.
Yeah.
Like I feel tired, I feel sad. Like, fair enough. Like it's not like those are invalid feelings, but you should not be coming to every conclusion. Yeah. Like, otherwise you're just going to make the most tired, sad decisions. You're like going to stay in bed and wallow.
Honestly, I was not having a good day earlier today, and I was like, oh man, I don't think I can do this podcast episode. Like, fuck this. Like, let's just give up. I'm like, tell Evan not to come. And then, well, you know what? This has been pretty good so far. So
it's been good
fun. That
I
I didn't listen to what my feelings were telling me to do today.
Did you want to lean into that in the podcast, or?
I mean, we can. As we talk about it, we'll talk about it. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Actually, I did want, because since we were talking about religion, I don't know if I told you about this yet, but I am starting my own secular religion at some point. So it's
is this a recruiting? Am I being recruited right now?
You're not being recruited. Well, you know what? If you like it, you like it. But I think basically, I don't know if we should go into the details today, but basically what I think I'm trying to do is just take like a lot of the old like religious and spiritual practices and put them into something that is secular and scientific, but that you can understand. So like, I want to explain like, you know, this meditation from a more scientific perspective, so that you can start doing it and it will improve your mental health in some way or something like that. And at the basis of it is just science. So we'll see where that goes. I don't know if today's the day to go into all the details, but I do feel like we need like community that teaches you mental health as well, I guess, if that makes sense. And I know I've seen like there's group therapy and stuff like that, but like, I guess even for me, just talking to my friends about my mental health has been super, super good.
Yeah, I think how like a community about mental health is really important, and that's when I was with Jack, now I've never been part of a religion that's preached mental health,
Yeah.
but with Jack.org, it was a community that preached mental health. And I found, one, they equip you with the tools to understand mental health, like not from a clinical point of view, but from a, personal evaluating yourself, understanding your friends, understanding what causes good and bad mental health, what to do in each situation, how to support a friend. And then it also was like a group of like-minded people who all have the same purpose. So it serves some of the same functions as like what you're talking about, where it's like, a reason to get out of bed every day, a community that teaches, that provides opportunities to better yourself. And like that I think, I was definitely proselytizing for the cause, but
I think you helped. I should hone in on, like, I guess what I feel is missing, because I love that group and I love everything you're talking about. But I think, to me, when I think of mental health, I think of like fixing your mental health problems, right? And I think what we feel like we're often missing is, like, because you said it's a reason to get out of bed in the morning, right? But I feel like when I think mental health, and I don't know if this is exactly how the group worked, I think like, fixing yourself, but then like, why am I getting out of the bed in the morning after I fixed my problems? Like, what do I do with my life, right? I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
gave you that, but
I think that's deeply personal.
Yeah.
And for everyone, it'll be different. For some people, it's just.
But how do you find that out?
I think everyone's gonna come to their own journey.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, I think it's wonderful that we have 8 billion people on Earth, and some people want to open a bakery, and that's their passion, and that's what they want to do. Some people want to become a piano player. Some people want to go into government. Some people want to go into banking. And I think everyone is just wired from birth, and that a handful of things are really going to fire them up, and that takes exploration. For me,
and that's the thing. That's what I think. Like, I want to talk to people about, like, that exploration process, because like, even if I fixed all my mental health issues, what does that exploration look like to find my reason to get out of bed?
I think it comes. I think it just happens. I
think there's a process, and that's another episode. But
yeah, I mean, I'm not the best person to say how it happens for everyone.
Yeah.
And I'm also like, a little meta, because like my reason for doing this is like solving these problems. Like originally it was solving the mental health crisis, which is still a crisis, and I still feel passionate about. It's just, drifted from my primary focus. Then I lost a friend to homelessness and mental health issues just over 4 years ago now. And that made me realize a different purpose, is that the mental health crisis is still enormous, but the change that I was, doing at the charity level wasn't enough to actually change the system. And so from then I found my purpose. Now I'm both lucky and unlucky that my purpose is maybe impossible to achieve in a lifetime. Ending the mental health crisis, ending chronic homelessness, changing it through government are not like, this is not like a 2-year project that you're embarking on. This is something that I will probably die before I see the results that I want. Not everyone has that, right? But I do think you're going to one day be fascinated with something, or really perplexed by a problem, or there's something that's going to make you feel emotional in a good or bad way. And if you're fascinated by it and you can't let it go, like with your podcast, for example, I think you just follow the string. I think you follow the string until you reach the end. And
I think, to me, once you get to the end of the string, the solution is just to keep doing that again.
Yeah, that's it, right? I think like when we're talking about my resume earlier, it's actually kind of funny. Like, it's not like, it's very non-traditional. Like none of these things are related to each other. I've done jobs for a few years here and there, but it's pretty like eclectic. There are some people where, they're going to start working in finance and they're going to be like, I actually really like this. This is what I want to do. And then that's their string, and it's a much longer singular string. But I think for people that are not feeling a sense of purpose, like you know, you might just have to kind of go out into uncomfortable situations and test yourself. Like, I'm not saying like go skiing one day and then do water polo the next, like, but kind of expose yourself to different groups of people. If you're curious about something, engage in it. And just by trial and error, you'll probably find that area, whether it's your career, whether it's a hobby, that really fires you up.
I think uncomfortable situations is an important part of it there, because I think that's where like the growth happens. That's where you find the new, like if you don't have purpose right now and you only do comfortable things, then you're going to do things that you don't give you purpose because you don't have purpose right now. But if you're doing uncomfortable things, maybe one of those things will be the thing that gives you purpose, because that means you're not used to it. You're not already doing it. So does that make sense?
Well, like, I think if you're doing only comfortable things, you're stuck in a rut. And then
I guess I'm like if you have meaning and you're doing comfortable things, which is, you know, the things that you've been like, maybe it's a 20-year project, right? Then I think that could work. But if you don't have meaning, that means that everything comfortable doesn't give you meaning. And so the only things that could give you meaning are things that you're not doing, which are things that you're uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think I only feel comfortable when I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like if I stay doing something too long, I'm like, I want to be growing. And that doesn't mean I just want to like quit my job every 6 months. That's like maniacal. But it does mean that I want to be facing a new challenge, and once I've overcome that challenge, I'm like, where's the next one? That's where I've found kind of like the zest of life, like the fulfillment, like instead of just being like Atlas pushing the boulder up the hill and watching it fall, you can be like, I've actually moved things like little by little. And
well, I think the way I understand the Atlas story, and maybe I'm misremembering it, but I feel my understanding is like he's pushing the boulder up like an infinite hill. I don't know if it rolls back down.
It rolls back down. Yeah.
Because
it's like a good. It's become like a parable for like the 9 to 5, because you push the boulder up, it goes back down. Because he's supposed to push it all the way up to the top, but every time it gets close to the top, it goes back down. But people have interpreted it in different ways. Like
I think my interpretation is basically just like it's an infinite hill that you will never get to the top of.
Oh, yeah, he doesn't get to the top ever.
Yeah. So like, I guess I don't think of it as like, you know, the boulder rolling down. It's just that like it's a magical, infinitely tall hill, and the idea is you got to find like a boulder that you enjoy pushing up the hill, right? And that's what meaning looks like. That's what growth looks like, is just like pushing the boulder a little bit, right? And I guess like uncomfortable, like being in too much comfort is just like, you know, being like, oh, we get the boulder this place, we'll just stop here for now, right? And to me, this all just ties back to like mental health and what are you doing with your life. And I think if you're, you know, pushing a boulder up the hill that you don't want to push up, then you're gonna feel meaningless too.
Yeah, no, that's it. I think especially for your job, this is the thing that you're going to spend the most hours of your life doing other than sleeping. If you hate it, like that's just a waste of time. Like we have only so many valuable days and years on this earth. And for me, that's meant I'm willing to take a pay cut to work in, you know, the nonprofit sector or as like an underpaid government staffer because I was pretty fired up about what I was doing. That's not going to be true for everyone, but for me, it was more important that my work is valuable and interesting and meaningful than and for some people it's just like I don't find pleasure in working. I just want to you know, have as much, you know, leisure time as possible or make as much money so that my leisure time goes far. Like those are the kinds of things that like everyone else can kind of figure out.
Well, I think like for me, my job is good and I like it, but it's not the thing that does fire me up at the end of the day. But it gives me time to, like, you know, make this podcast and stuff like that, and that, so I'm able to find something that does fire me up.
And like I guess what I mean is like you shouldn't hate your job, like because that's just like a, you know, you're just gonna have a toxic sink. But I think, you know, if you're able to spend your leisure time doing the things you like when I was a staffer, sometimes I'd have time for the things I love, but I often found my leisure time was just like trying to fight burnout. So it's like I really loved my job,
Yeah.
but my leisure time was basically consumed with how do I make sure I could go back to work the next day after working like, you know, a 60-hour week and being on call for the weekend.
Yeah, and I think that's fine if you like the job, right? But if you don't like the job and your free time goes to like recovering from the job, then like your whole life is just spent doing things you don't like, right?
Yeah.
But if you find a job, maybe, you know, has less hours, but it gives you time to do something on the side, and you not burn out from it, that's good. And like, yeah, like those situations work. But if you don't like it and you're burnt out, and I think a lot of people do jobs like that for money, right? But it's like, what is that money getting you at the end of the day, right?
No, that's it. Like, some people do value money, and, you know, not that I personally relate, but I can understand it. Eventually you have to take the time to enjoy what you've earned. Otherwise, like, you know, there's a certain point where money stops mattering.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, the way I see it is valuing money as an end goal is this is probably a little controversial, but like valuing just money is a symptom of mental health issues. I think if you're like, I want money for this or that or that or that, like you have like another value that you're trying to achieve with the money, then to me that's like, okay, let's
I mean, if you're just hoarding money like Smog hoards gold, then
yeah, right.
I mean, I think you've said that like every billionaire on earth has a mental health problem. Like,
well, so I don't think so, because I think a lot of billionaires like they're building their companies, right? The reason that they have so much money is that they have this company that they're passionate about, and that's where all their money comes from, right? Like I think the vast majority of them don't choose to sell their shares. They keep their shares because they want control of the company, because they're pursuing their passion. But I think generally that's, at least for me, when I've been the most successful is when I am doing those kinds of things, like pursuing my passion things. Not saying that every billionaire maybe is like, you know, pursuing their passion or honestly, they probably are. Just, you know, maybe we can question why that's their passion.
yeah.
But yeah.
No, I think there's a certain point for me where I want to make sure, you know, my needs are met. My health is okay. Good. My family's like, there's a certain amount, but beyond that, like, I think I would never take more money for a job I like less. Like, there's a limit to that. Like, of course, I would accept $100 million to do something I hate for a year, but in general, like, I just really value doing good things and like being happy with the way I spend my time.
Yeah. Well, I think to me that is, and when I'm talking about like, you know, what does a happy life look like, I would think people need to be talking about that kind of thing. Like I think that's true for almost everybody, that that you should do things that you want to do, right? And I think you could take a better paying job to get more money that you don't like, that maybe gives you more security so you can go work on your mental health, and then you can go find something that you do like, right? But if you're just taking it for the more money and there's no like, you're not going to use that security to work on your mental health, or you're not going to use that money to buy a house so you feel more stable so you can work on yourself, then it's not really going anywhere, and it's just kind of like the self-perpetuating cycle of like nothing leads to nothing leads to nothing. Like unhappiness leads to more unhappiness, and then
well, there is a phenomenon where like in North America, like it's like, you know, in the last century, like wages like blew up, and like there, you know, if you wanted to live the lifestyle of the previous generation, like you could easily do that working like, you know, a handful of hours a week, but that wouldn't continue to boom the economy. And so like a lot of like, you know, consumption was created that didn't exist before. In some ways it was good. In some ways, like there's like a keeping up with the Joneses. Like I don't actually like want a bigger house or like, you know, the newest TV, but my neighbor has it. Or today it's like my, you know, phone is fine, but the new iPhone came out. People are going to make fun of you if I have an iPhone 6. Like that kind of stuff, like it's perpetuated by our society that like,
well, I think to me a lot of it is just like cope for your mental health problems, and then you just buy more expensive cope to like instead of drug abuse, it's shopping abuse or whatever, and you just like do more and more and more of that, and then you get a job that you hate more, and then you get more burnt out from it, and then you do more shopping or this kind of thing. And like my perspective on this is interesting because I feel like I want people to have more money, but at the same time, I think a lot of people are wasting a lot of money on things that aren't actually helping them.
Yeah, I think what I think just for the general population, not for a specific individual, is I think it's important that we have a strong bottom floor and safety net where I think there are certain things that every human deserves.
Yeah.
That would be education, access to health care, secure lodging, making sure no one's going hungry. I don't care if like not everyone has access to like a Canada Goose jacket or the newest like MacBook Pro. Like that stuff is a little more materialistic, and in a free society there is going to be some people who have more and some people who have less. I think it's just important that the people who have less have enough.
Yeah.
Like I think there's a bar that's that I don't think is being met right now.
Well, I think going back to what we were saying earlier, like part of the reason that I think that bar is so important is I think it's really hard to work on your mental health issues if you don't have that basic security, right? And if we can give those people that basic security, they're much likely to go work on their mental health issues now and then like get a job or start doing something with their life or find something meaningful, right? Because it's when you don't have a home, it's really hard to work on your depression, right?
Yeah.
Like it feels it's a lot more real.
And then going even more meta with that, where if you have a large segment of the population who doesn't have a lot, is struggling to get by, dealing with mental health issues, diagnosed or not, and they don't see answers coming from basic structural society, they look for solutions wherever they can find them, and it's hard to find solutions. And when someone comes in and says, I have the solutions, it's to close the border with Mexico, or to ban trans kids from playing in school, or like it could be anything. It can be absolute nonsense. But if you have someone that's saying, I understand where you're coming from, I have the solution, it's very easy, just click the button, people are going to click the button. And that goes back to kind of the purpose of being here, is that there's a lot of people that have felt ignored for too long, and the feelings are there. The feelings are real.
The feelings are real.
People might not be, acting in their own best interest, but people just want something.
They need something to change because they feel bad,
Yeah.
and they're not okay with continuing to feel bad, which is very fair.
Yeah. And historically, this is what happens. Like, I think everyone needs like a history lesson where when people are angry and their needs are unmet, they revolt. Like, it happened in Russia. It happened in France. It happened in the United States like 250 years ago. It's happening everywhere in the world right now, where people are just pissed off. And I think if we have a society that a baseline, people are at the very least safe and healthy and, able to advance their goals. I think you're going to see a lot less of that anger. And like, I would say your mental health and your mental well-being really is kind of at the core of, how like human society functions.
Yeah, it definitely is.
How are we doing for time?
We're at an hour 16, so we're going over time.
No, I think we'll cut it off here.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show, Evan.
Yeah.
Good to have you.
Absolutely.
There it is.